Welcome to River Darling Art and ASMR. We are going to be working on this turkey. I've already started to ink wash him. I think what we're going to start doing at first now is probably maybe put my inks away for a second and do a little bit of line work here with these pencils. The colours that I've chosen are a very dark blue, a slightly purple dark red, and a dark brown. And I am going to start off with the red. And I'm just going to start by very gently just reaffirming these little lines here. So this could have also been done in ink, but I find you would need to draw over it again once you've done a few ink washes, because as you can see, when you're layering ink, it tends to bleed and wash and it can be quite dreamy. But I just want to crisp this up a little bit. And I want to make a solid line, but I don't want to make it too outlined, if that makes sense. So I want there to be lines, but without really over contouring it, without giving it that definition, that sort of cartoony feel. So I'm going to go around these funny little... I love these bubbles. They're dreadful, aren't they? Go put bubbles on a creature's head. I suppose a lot of people would have a lot of answers and a lot of them would be very different. But who did this? Who put bubbles on this creature's head? They are marvellous though. It just sets me off. Oh, I don't know. Could I don't think I could deal with having a face like that. But then again, if I were a turkey, I don't think I'd probably have other matters to concern myself with. Well, yes, there'd be absolutely 2 times of the year I would probably be more preemptive than concerning myself about the appearance of my caruncles, which they may not be called in turkeys, but that is what, if this was a duck, it would be called. I know for certain on a Muscovy duck they are called caruncles. I believe that is how it's said. I've heard a few people say it. It's strange actually, you find there's some words that although you would use them all the time and they feel so familiar to you, you think, oh, have I actually really ever heard anyone use these? I know there have been many words over the years, to my great shame, that I have been corrected on my enunciation, or my pronunciation I should say, that I've never heard, like, oh no, there's a very serpentine dragon that doesn't have any back legs, and I would call it, oh, to my deepest of shames, I'll call it a wyvern. A wyvern? A wyvern? I think it's like a wyvern, but not a wyvern. But that's what the word looks like. My brain just fills in the gaps because I don't know how to say that, so we'll just make an approximation. People know what I mean. Apart from they always pull the same face, because I as you can see, I will come to the same point where I go, I don't know how to say that word. And I go to say it, and I say it in exactly the same incorrect manner as I've said it many, many previous times, and people have, to their great guffaw and amusement, corrected me, and then my brain goes, nah, it was right the first time, and then forgets entirely. So these caruncles, or the bubbly bits, They go right up the back of the head. That sounds like a very Rowan Atkinson, very bubbly bits. The bubbly bits. They go right up the back of the head here, which in my opinion are just abhorrent, and I couldn't stand having them, but then again I am not a turkey. Actually, when you think about it, probably turkeys think they're very, very woo. They're quite attractive. It's me thinking, I would hate it. Whereas actually, all the teenage turkeys like, yeah, I got my caruncles coming in. My hand probably, hopefully, went off screen for that strange little action I just did then to make it sound like some cool skatery boy. I do hope so. Just yet more exposing myself to continuous shame. Never mind. So I'm going to be really loose with these bits here. So these are much bigger. I think I could probably make them more prominent just by doing the next ink washes over the top. However, I do want to give a bit more definition. And one of the things I really like about these pencils, because I believe they are wax or oil based, I'm not sure. Regardless, they are water resistant. So when I put my regardless, I care not for these scientific measurements of what things are actually made from. You can just put a water wash over the top, and they will just repel all that pigment, and you'll get that lovely burst of fresh colour underneath, especially if you've put it down onto virgin paper, and it will have that really lovely clean glow to it. And I highly recommend that. If as a child you were fascinated by the magic of drawing on a piece of paper with a candle or a wax crayon, well, I don't think kids did it generally with wax crayons, but I know it should be a fairly shared experience that at some point we've tried to draw something with a wax candle and then poured some paint over it and be like, oh wow, look, yeah, there's my sun. It looks all like splodgy, but there it is. It wasn't there before, only in a very shiny form. I apologise, I get really excited and then I just babble. A bit of a babbler. Oh, this does please me actually. I might stop going with the red and then fade in a little bit of blue there. So I'm going to put a little bit of red on the. I don't know what I think this is called. I want to call it a snood. A snood. I don't know if it's a snood. A hood. It might be called a hood or a snood. I'm calling it a snood. I think it's a snood. This is what happens when you don't research your subject matter. But this is fantastic. This is like an inflatable thing. And I've seen a video of a lady who she rescues ducks and chickens, and she just sort of sets up this sanctuary in her backyard, but she does loads of amazing stuff for her local wildlife. And she has rescued turkeys over the years, and there are these lovely videos of her just sort of like cuddling and interacting with them, and this silly little snoot. It's quite interactive, so it just sort of goes up and down and she's talking to it. I think when they're very relaxed, it just completely like blob. So it'll be like right down there, and it's just it's quite sweet actually. Because I find with birds are a lot about body language. There's not a lot of facial expression to a bird. One of the things I love most about ducks. Oh, it doesn't take me long to start talking about ducks. One of the things that I most love about ducks, of the many, 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 many things I love about ducks, is they have a slight crest just here. And ordinarily it just looks like a big blobby round duck face, and you wouldn't notice anything sort of interactive about it, but they obviously can retract the skin and the muscles on the top of the head, so they can kind of like raise it up like a little crest. If you think of a cockatoo, and a cockatiel, and the way they just use their little sulphur crested cockatoo, Pt.2 is probably the, yeah, cockatiel or cockatoo. Yeah, it's kind of like that, but obviously it's not as spectacular as on those birds. I'm just going to give like a little bit more because I like how it's giving it this definition around the hood, and also I know that these lines will rise back up when I wash over it again, and I kind of like that it'll give it that really subtle grounding just there. So I'm going to swap for me old pinky. So I'm going to grab the very, very dark blue. And I'm kind of going to do the same thing again, but this I'm going to use like a negative colour. I'm also going to use it a bit more softly, and I'm also going to use it more as a shader as well as an outline. So with the red, it was definitely more of a mid-tone being used as an outline, whereas this is very much, I'm going to use it as a shadow as well. So I'm just going to bring that in. Just going to put a little bit of roundness just there, because obviously that will just help bring it all together, and I'll just give that little bit of definition where the pupil is, just to give me a helping hand. Okay, perfect. I don't want to do too much around the beak because I'm probably going to do a bit more of that with the brown. And the brown I'm going to use as my ultimate black. So I'm kind of using the red as a mid-tone shadow, the blue as my deepest shadow, and then the brown as a black. Some would almost say it was a slight defiance to use black. I just feel like there's so much more interesting colours you can use. There's so much more different languages you can use in every art piece. Why choose black? It's a fantastic tool, and it's fantastic at setting the scene, but when you think about it, everything is made out of an individual colour. Why wouldn't you pick apart that hierarchy of what makes something black and use that instead? So I'm just going to put a bit more definition around the old nostril and the snood. A little bit around there in the end. I'm just going to gently shade that in, because why not? There we go. He's really starting to pop now. It's a tiny bit. So I don't want to, as I say, I don't want to do an outline. So where I'm going to just add that definition there, I'm just going to do it on that top bit. No more. If I were maybe behaving a little bit slower, I would have put it there and there, so that bit could have become a shine, but I have done the absolute opposite of what I am now like, well, that would have been the obvious choice to make. So I'm just going to use a bit of that now to deepen some of these red. So you see how I'm using it as a much darker shadow than the ones I've already put in here. There we go. And then there's a lot of shadows for the old bobbly bits just behind this neck snood. It's just a beak and a snood. That's pretty much what this bird is. I do apologise to any turkey keepers that are just, if I find out I've been saying the wrong word this whole time, I see you and I respect your birds and your craft. I apologise. There we go. So we're just popping a little bit all around there. There we go. See? Like so. So now I'm down here. I'm just going to quickly give it some definition as it comes into the feathers. But I want to allow this to wash off a little bit because, yeah, I don't want to put in like a huge amount of detail into these feathers around the back. So I want to give the impression of them. So we're just going to do some really gentle lines. So the definition can be there, but I absolutely want the definition more towards this top part. And then nothing. Nothing. None for you, bottom part. As there we go. Right, okay. So I think that's all I really need to do there to just create that impression that I want. I'm probably going to put a little bit more into these bumbles. These are quite a lot bigger than the other ones. I do not like this. I can see how, you know, I'd be presented with a little turkey chicken. I think, oh, isn't it beautiful? Isn't it wonderful? And then I'm like, oh, it's full of bubbles, and I would still love it, but I would maybe slightly judge it. There we go. There's a little definition just on the back of the head. There we go. Right. There's just almost like where there were originally feather follicles. Have just given up the ghost and been like, you know what, we're just going to be one giant snooty bubble. Some ducks and or chickens have woken up in the background, so I do apologise if you can hear them. They are fiddling about with something. Just going to use a little bit of brown now. Just going to use a little bit of that brown, as I said, just to set off the parts that have no, quite frankly, no right to be either pink or blue. And I'm just going to give a little bit more definition. So, some little creases on the beak. Distinction between that upper part and the lower. All sorts of odd nostril business. Go. And just a little bit. Oh, this bird does have a really beautiful eye. Just round that big, beautiful brown eye. I am a little bit of a sucker for birds with brown eyes. One of the colours of cool duck I keep are called chocolate, and well, they got big brown eyes. Like again, I feel like all I ever do is diss on my chickens, but the chickens, the ones I keep, they when they mature, their eyes turn orange, and you're like, oh, I can't quite give in to you in the same way. But no, give me a duck with a big brown eye. And I shall be charmed relentlessly. Okay, right, here we go. Beautiful. I think maybe we are now at the stage to do a little bit more ink washing. Do we dare? Yes, we do. So here we go, now with the blue finger, and I'm going to get a really light, I'm going to make sure this is a really light wash, and I'm just going to start filling in these shadows just a teeny weeny bit. There we go. Maybe a bit darker. We can be brave. I always like that very first time I touch that paper. I like to make sure I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Just going to dry that quickly. Maybe a mixture between the two. I'm not quite 100% on either of the amount of blues I've got in either of these puddles here. I want a mixture between the two of you. Yeah, let's try that. So again, I'm using blue as a real shadow. I'm going to work the other way around with the ink than I did with the pencil. Because I can quite easily work a much more neat red on top of this. And I can also use it almost like a secondary colour, like a highlight to this colour. So where I work in some blue, I can then put some red like right in front of it. Which is quite different from how I would do it with the pencil. I would work down. Normally I would work down in the earlier stages of doing my ink washes. But because we're quite further into drawing this piece, I would be using my neater ink as pops of colour, if that makes sense. So while I'm using like a stronger pigmented stroke, I would be working from passive colours to active. So my blue being a more passive shadow than my pink. But I would still go on to use a black or a dark brown as the very last thing, purely as an absolute accentuation of anything that needs to be that real final value. So whether that would be in the pupil, which, to be honest, you could easily work up with just a little bit of blue. And again, you could just put black in that very, very centre. You don't need to use that much black in a piece at all, I think. Personally, or at least that works just for my style and the way I do it in quite a sort of colourful way. I'm going to just draw a little bit more around here. Just bring that down a little bit more, and a little bit more around these bubbles. There we go. I feel that my demeanour has changed because this then becomes very serious. Pencil feels like I'm still absolutely in control, whereas this is more driving on ice, and you've got a little bit of that volatility of your medium itself, where it could just turn around at any point and be like, nah, I'm not going to go there. So as you can see, we've really pushed those values down. I'm now going to get a little bit of that red. Put my red in here, just like that. Do one right over, and I'm going to really allow the very tip of my paintbrush to touch, just to give a bit more independence. That's a strange word, but there's a wobble in my hand, as there are also all over this creature's face, that will allow the width and the pressure behind my brush to continuously change, and I just want to sort of let it follow that a little bit. There we go. That's around here. Bobbly bit. Bobbly bit. Just going to wash in this element a little bit more. And then these little bad boys down here. And just round the back there. There we go. And that's a little bit chunky, so I'm just going to break that up a teeny weeny bit. There we go. I'm going to get this even paler. I'm just going to give a bit more to the old snood. Just a teeny bit around here, just to give a bit more depth to my brown. And to the underbeak there, just to add that little bit of contrast. Nice, okay. So I'm now going to do the same thing again, but to my blues. Just going to dry my paintbrush a little bit. And I'm just going to push it in around the edges of the face here, just to give it a bit more contouring. Going to contour you and your bobbly bits. Okay, and now what I'm going to do next, I'm going to change up to a much bigger paintbrush. I'm just going to wash in this area here, just to get it all flowing in and upwards. So I'm going to be using, I think, quite a recklessly big brush. Lovely. I also have this is my art towel. I recommend everyone has an art towel. So art towel will sit on my lap for emergencies. And I'm going to take that blue, I'm going to pop it in there, take a bit more pigment, there we go. And I don't want my brush to be too wet, but I really find, yeah, there's quite a balance, I'll put it that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move really quickly and freely and in a panic, because it always feels like I go in a panic when I do this. Here we go. Too wet. Tend to use either pointy or rounded brushes for stuff like this, because otherwise I find, well, my finger, no, you dastardly beast. Oh, no, we shall eradicate, but we're going with the same direction as the beak here, so we're just kind of like, boop, 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 like bringing that up. And I always make sure I get a little bit behind the head just to keep that motion. You are too solid. When I'm doing this, if I then go over again, as you can see here, where I've then sort of dabbed a bit of that pigment out with a more watery brush, you will get that kind of, like when you allow ink to run and it separates into the different pigments, it does that, which can be a really nice effect for the background. You can see as I go back down this spot here, it will open up much more purple colours. And I'm going to take a little bit darker and just pop it in there. This is always, honestly, I can't convey how terrifying this bit is. Because if I don't like this bit, I have ruined everything, and I will just, I'm not completely adverse to rage quitting, but we won't do that today. This is a relaxing paint with me. This isn't rage quitting. So there we go. For now, I think we'll be leaving him here. We will be letting him dry. I will be pressing him back flat again, and we will reassess the damage and probably put the last finishing touches on him and call him a day. There we go. He looks very wistful, doesn't he? Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope you enjoyed my babbling and my panicking and my and this turkey. We will finish him off again soon. Again, thank you so much for spending time with me and enjoying what I do, and I wish you all the very best. Ta-ra!